Okay, everybody, the votes are all in. Everything has been tallied up, and so now it is my pleasure as a One Piece YouTuber guy to reveal to you, the entire world, who is authoritatively, objectively, the best One Piece character. It's a good thing we're finally getting this. You know, a lot of people out there were like, my favorite character is Zoro. My favorite character is Sanji. My favorite character is Shanks. Well, great. Now we have objectivity. I'll tell you what. All right, the best character in One Piece. Everybody has to agree with it. There's no other route. Oh, yep, that's a good one. Yep. Bartholomew Kuma. Yep, all right, let's hear it for Kuma, ladies and gentlemen. Now, it's important to mention, he did not win this prize just because he's a really strong character, although he is. He did not win this prize just because he has a really cool devil fruit, because he does. Or maybe just because he was a really good father to Bonney, who isn't even his biological daughter, but man, he stepped up, I'll tell you what. No, the real reason that Kuma won this objective, authoritative prize of being the best One Piece character, settling the debate for all time, is because he respected geography. Last chapter, Kuma went on a world tour, a Kuma quest, as it were, to try to find the cure to his daughter's life-threatening illness or something. It doesn't really matter why he was doing it. The point is, he traveled the world, and in One Piece chapter, we got to see different islands from all over the Four Blues and the Grand Line. He even went into the sky. Do you know how long it's been since we've seen a sky island in One Piece? I think the last time was when Arouge was hanging out at Balloon Terminal and Kaido, was, I don't know, doing a high dive record or something, whatever. But, we got to see that in the last chapter, so that was really cool. So today, we're going to go through the last chapter in terms of, where Kuma went and exactly why. Now, it's important to mention, all of the places that Kuma went, this is why I got really excited, are the locations that he sent the Straw Hats at the end of Sabaody. So that kind of teaches us a couple of things about Kuma's Paw fruit. Number one, I think we probably already assumed this, but he had to be on an island in order to send somebody to the island. He has to be at least familiar with the location that he is sending you, I guess it's maybe possible Kuma with his powers could, I will send you exactly 527 kilometers north by northeast. Hope there's something there. Boop. And then just send you flying. Maybe he could do something like that. But, when he sent the different Straw Hats to their various locations where they were going to train for 2 years, and of course, that was also part of the plan, because Kuma had yet to be completely turned into a PX0 at this point, so he still had a little bit of his own personality. So he was, separating the Straw Hats to make sure they didn't get killed by Kizaru and the other Pacifista that was there, and Sentomaru that was there. And so he was just like, all right, I'm going to send them off to various locations that are suiting to their individual abilities so they can train and get stronger, like sending Nami to Weatheria. Obviously, that was planned, okay? But why did Kuma travel to these very specific islands? Yes, it was obviously to try to find a cure to Bonney's illness, but in the review, I mentioned that some of the islands he went to didn't make a lot of sense, like Weatheria, for instance, an island that is catered to the weather. Why would Kuma go there to try to cure a disease? But a lot of people actually left some comments on exactly the reasons why he would go to these individual locations. Like, he wasn't traveling to these lands randomly. Maybe a couple. He was there just like, oh, okay, well, I'm here at this random island in the Grand Line. Might as well disembark and check to see if anybody could cure this illness. It's like nothing ventured, nothing gained. But I think most of the islands he went to, he had a very clear mission in line. Kind of like a Samurai Jack sort of thing, where it's like, I need to get back to the past. And it's like, I hear there's a time portal on this island, and then he travels there. And, Aku does some stupid shit and takes away the time portal. Kind of like that, where Kuma's just traveling the world, following leads, trying to find anybody and anyone that could possibly cure his daughter, okay? So the first place he goes, which makes sense, is the Torino Kingdom in the South Blue, okay? This is the location he sends Chopper, so he could train to become a great doctor. So the Torino Kingdom, or the Birdie Kingdom, is in the same region of the world as the Sorbet Kingdom is. They're both in the south, so it's like, okay, maybe Kuma overheard some stuff in just his own backyard. Maybe some old-timers on Sorbet were like, we hear there's an island out there in the south somewhere that giant birds live, but also medically advanced group of people live on the island as well. You know, birds and medical science. You wouldn't assume that those two things go together, but this is the One Piece world, and they certainly do, right? So Kuma goes to the Torino Kingdom and shows the natives there, hey, this is my daughter. You know, she has this illness where sapphire scabs, like scales, are appearing all over her body, and it's apparently going to kill her in 5 years. Does anybody here know this disease? Anybody can help me with this? And the natives of the island are just kind of looking at it and are just like, yeah, she can't go outside in the sun? That's awful. Unfortunately, we don't really, we've never heard of that illness, so we don't really know we can help you with that. See, you also have to keep in mind a couple of things here. Kuma does not know a lot about the disease. All he knows is the name of it, but even the doctor that diagnosed Bonney doesn't know a lot about it, because it's like no one's had this illness for so long. It's been like hundreds of years ago. That doctor probably read about it in some random medical journal. That might have just been his thing, to collect very rare collections of diseases. You know, it's like, I don't know. I don't know a lot about rare diseases, but this would be like if somebody caught a disease that has been wiped out for like 700 years in our world or something. It's just like, oh, wow, I can't believe this is still around, okay? So the doctor knew the name of it, and he understood that it would eventually kill Bonney, and that, you know, if she is exposed to any type of natural light, that'll cause the spread of the disease. But beyond that, that's all he really knew. There's no known cure, and then that's all Kuma, therefore, would know, okay? So, more than anything, he's just trying to find out more information about the disease itself, which could lead to why he went to a lot of places. So, on the Torino Kingdom, and we only get like one panel for each of these locations, so we don't know the whole, like, details of his journey, but I'm assuming Kuma stayed on the island for a little while, right? I'm assuming Kuma didn't just walk over to the natives of Torino and be like, hey, this is my daughter. Do you have a cure for her illness? It's called Sapphire Scale. And they're like, no, we've never even heard of that. Okay, later, bye, I gotta get going. No, I think he probably hung out on the island a little bit because they have this vast medical library that Chopper, you know, studied in. So, you know, they were probably like, oh, well, we never hear of this kind of disease, but we have library with many big books. You can go read, okay? And so Kuma's like, all right. So he goes into the library, probably, you know, peruses the library a little bit, but finds nothing about it. I also kind of find it funny because a big thing with the Torino Kingdom was that the birds in the trees were like guarding all of the herbs and the things that they needed to make medicine. So I was like, did they ask Kuma, hey, large bear man, can you help us get the herbs down from the tree? The birds are really mad. They don't want us to take them. Of course, the birds were just defending their nests, and so there was a little bit of a misunderstanding. So I don't know. I guess they either did not ask Kuma to help them with that, or Kuma decided not to because the person that solved that problem was Chopper like a couple years later, right? But no, I'm sure the people of the Torino Kingdom, because they are medically advanced, they knew a lot about like you know, like natural ointments and plants and things that could cure you. So it's very likely they might have taught Kuma all they know about like skin diseases and various ways to treat them, but they didn't know about that specific disease, and they therefore didn't have a cure for Sapphire Scale. But I think on every, or maybe most islands that Kuma visited, he learned a little bit more about like diseases and about the effects that the sun have on you and various things, you know what I mean? So Kuma probably learned, got a little bit of a crash course in medical knowledge at the Torino Kingdom, which is a good place to learn it, but beyond that, he didn't learn anything to actually cure Bonney. So the next place he goes is the Gloomy Kingdom, or the ruins of the Gloomy Kingdom, Kuraigana Island. This is the location where Mihawk lives, although we didn't know if Mihawk was living there at the time. So this was 4 years before the current storyline, so 2 years before Luffy left his hometown, Fuchsia Village, to go be a pirate, all right? So this is very close to, like, when, like, at this point, when this is going on, when Kuma's traveling the world, Luffy's at Fuchsia training. He's 15 years old, getting ready to go and be a pirate. Ace has already left at this point, you know, and so it's pretty close to the original story, right? So he goes to the Kuraigana Island. We don't see Mihawk, but maybe he was living there. I asked in the review, like, why would he go there? It's just the ruins of a kingdom. Way back at the beginning of this flashback, when the God Valley incident was occurring, and they were talking about how every 3 years they hold this extermination tournament, the Tenryubito do, and then they just take over an island and annihilate it. I instantly thought to Kuraigana. I instantly thought to Mihawk's Island, because Mihawk says that about 9 years ago there was this massive war, that it was like a war that destroyed the entire kingdom, and then the local wildlife, the animals, the human drills, learned violence from that war. So I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, ooh, what if that was one of the islands that the government had their extermination tournament on? And so they took over the island, killed everybody on the island, everybody died, and then it was just an empty ruin. And since the government effectively took it over, therefore Mihawk could just set up shop there. Like, we always assumed Mihawk was like a squatter living on that island, but maybe it was like Mihawk was like, I will be a warlord, but I need a place to stay. And the government's like, yeah, tell you what, there's this one island a few years ago that we used for an extermination tournament. It's empty now. If you want it, you can have it. And he's like, very well, I will live here. He sees the giant Dracula castle, and he's like, this is fitting for me, yes. I thought that's the way it would have went. Unfortunately, the timelines don't add up quite well for that. It's not like in the 3-year intervals. Maybe it has something to do with the extermination tournament, or maybe it was just a localized, like, war that was on that kingdom, and then just everybody died, okay? So why would Kuma go to that location? Okay, well, he does know that Bonney's sickness has something to do with natural light and the sun. Okay, it causes that to encroach more on her body with the curse mark, as it were. The curse mark is encroaching on her. No, the Sapphire Scale, right? So it would make sense that he would go to islands that had weird weather patterns. Like, so even if it's like, okay, natural light is a no-go, so what if I go to an island where there is no natural light, where it's called the Gloomy Kingdom for a reason, where it's always very muggy and damp, and the skies are always cloudy, and there doesn't seem to be any natural light raining down. Maybe, worst case scenario, maybe I could move Bonney here, because it really does suck that Bonney's not able to just go outside at all. So maybe Kuma was thinking like, all right, well, even if I don't find a cure for her, maybe I can at least take her here, and then she can at least live outside until, the time comes when she can't. I mean, eventually the disease is going to kill her no matter what, but at least here, it's dark enough that she can go outside and play with the woodland creatures and everything like that, and pick flowers and something. Or I guess it's the Kuraigana Kingdom. They don't really have flowers. She can pick mushrooms. We could have a nice bouquet of mushrooms or something. She can at least go outside and get some fresh air, kind of. And then probably Kuma saw the human drills that are equipped with, like, rifles and swords and war scythes, and he was probably like, nah, this probably isn't a safe place to raise a child. I'm going to go to the next island, okay? So that was the Kuraigana Island. Next up is the island of Baldimore. Okay, now this one makes sense. So the Kingdom of Baldimore on Karakuri Island. This was the place Frankie got sent, but also it was the place Vegapunk grew up. This was the island he was born on, and the reason it has the title of the Future Land is because Vegapunk in his youth lived on this island, probably ate the brain fruit on this island, and began to create all these crazy, wacky inventions, like cyborgs. He developed devil fruit technology here, even had technology like schematics for like laser beams and stuff that Frankie co-opted into himself. He tried to build the giant heating apparatus that would warm the entire island, something he would eventually succeed at Egghead with the island aircon system. So this one does make sense, where Kuma is like, I need to find somebody brilliant that can cure Bonney. Wait a minute, who's the most brilliant person in the world? Dr. Vegapunk. Okay, well, it's going to be kind of hard for me to find him. I guess the best place for me to check is the island he was born on. So he goes to Baldimore and he asks around. He's like, oh, sorry, old man Vegapunk, he left to join Mads a while ago, and now I hear he's part of the world government, so he's not here. Maybe Kuma tried to ask to get into, like, well, can I get into his lab to look around? And maybe he wasn't allowed to or something like that. Or maybe he did break in and look at some stuff. Who knows? And then he just left everything there. And then when Frankie came there years later, it was all still there or something. And other than Frankie, Kuma did not accidentally self-destruct the entire damn island. So, maybe something like that. There were also some brilliant scientists on Baldimore, but probably none of them, a lot of them were probably more mechanics and engineers, stuff like that. From what we saw of Baldimore during the anime, it was a little bit technologically advanced. Like, they had like conveyor belts in their homes and like sliding Star Trek sci-fi doors and stuff like that. But that was more like engineering mechanic work, not so much, like stem cell research like what Vegapunk had, okay? So he did go there. That does actually make a lot of sense. The next place he went was not really, he didn't go here, but Tequila Wolf, and he just kind of sailed under the bridge. He was probably going, to another island somewhere in the east, and he just happened to sail under Tequila Wolf, this giant bridge. I don't imagine that Kuma stopped there to ask anybody about that. It would just be a bunch of prisoners and and a bunch of government guards that are ordering the prisoners and slaves to keep building this bridge to an unknown location that'll probably never be finished. So I don't think he stopped there. It was just a place he traveled under, but he probably knew that, like, okay, this is a place that Dragon would probably liberate eventually because he's a revolutionary, so it does kind of make sense why he would send Robin there later. Although, the timing of this is perfect, because it's like that bridge had been there for 700 years. And even the Revolutionary Army had been active for like 20 years or something like that. But the moment he sends Robin there, that was the exact moment the revolutionaries decided to have their big moment to overthrow the higher-ups on Tequila Wolf. So Kuma planned that perfectly in terms of the timeline, I have to say. Maybe Kuma was aware. Maybe Dragon told him, like, yeah, we're going to be planning on attacking Tequila Wolf. We're finally going to liberate that bridge in about 3 months. And then Kuma's like, oh, okay, I'll send Robin there then. She'll be fine. I was like, yeah, okay. The next place. Weatheria. This is great. So Kuma, with the paw powers, he could pretty much go anywhere in the world, even up into the sky. So he probably warped himself up into the sky. So I asked, why would he go here? The island that is specifically catered to studying the weather if he's trying to find a disease, trying to find a cure for a disease, right? Well, it actually does make a little bit of sense, and a lot of people clarified this, so I wanted to thank you all. The disease spreads via natural light, so sunlight, moonlight, right? So it would make sense that Kuma would go to a place that studies weather to learn about, like, okay, how does this work? And so we see him talking to Haradis, the wizard that teaches Nami. Haradis probably taught, he's like, oh, well, I don't have any cure for your daughter's illness. I'm sorry for you, Kuma, I can't help. But, I can teach you about the sun's rays. And so probably he taught Kuma about, like, UV radiation and stuff like that. And, like, if you get a certain amount of radiation pelted onto your skin, then you can develop, various, abnormalities and, like, skin cancers and stuff like that. He might have taught Kuma a little bit about that kind of stuff and just learned more about the effects. So Kuma learning more about not the symptoms, but learning more about the causes of the disease rather than the cure. But, like, that's maybe the idea. Like, if I understand more about what causes Sapphire Scale, maybe that will lead to me developing a cure for it, something like that. It really is sad because Kuma's like, there's no cure for this. I have to figure out the cure myself, maybe. And Kuma's not a doctor, but he has to learn as fast as possible, okay? So it's this idea of, like, futility a little bit, right? So that's probably what Haradis taught him about. Taught him about how the sun's rays affect living organisms. Maybe learned about, like, how the moonlight is reflected sunlight, and maybe what would trigger the disease and stuff like that. But there's nothing more beyond that. Fun fact with Haradis, really quick, and I'll just mention it now because when else am I going to have a time to mention Haradis? So in the manga, he's like 9 feet tall. He's like a super tall, lanky wizard guy. In the anime, they made him super short. I just find that funny. They made him, like, shorter than Nami in the anime. It's just so funny. But anyway, next up we have the Bowin Islands. Now, this is the last place we see him go, but there's some other locations I wanted to mention, okay? So he goes to the Bowin Islands. They're the Stomach Barren, which are not really islands. They're giant carnivorous plants that are in the middle of the Grand Line. This is another location I think it makes sense why Kuma would go. So Heracleson is a famous botanist. There's actually a lot of those in the One Piece world. There's a lot of botanists that are really badass in One Piece. They're like, all right, everybody, we're going to get a group of the most badass botanists this side of a fern, and we're going to go out there and we're going to study plants. Yeah! They pick up swords and guns, and it's as they head out to sea. And that was the group that Heracleson was part of. And they arrive at the Bowin Islands, and they all got completely killed, except for Heracleson, who stayed on the island to conduct his research. Anybody out there that's a botanist, you have my respect. You guys are badass. I'll tell you what. You guys are, like, damn straight teching. There's a botanist watching my video right now. He's wearing, like, a tank top, loading an assault rifle. He's got a cigarette in his mouth with a little flower at the end of it, and he's like, damn straight teching. We're out botanists. We're badass. We got to study plants. You got to be ready. All right, yeah, okay. Noland, same way. Noland was the same way. He was a botanist, badass adventurer. You know what I mean? You got to be ready. I mean, in a world where there are giant plants that can eat you, you got to be ready. All right, okay. So he probably overheard, like, oh, yeah, there's this place. There's an island with rare plants and seeds and all this kind of, like, plant life and foliage and everything like that. There's a dude there that's a maybe the best botanist in the entire world, Heraclean, right? And so maybe he might know something. Maybe there might be some rare plant on that island that could help you, or a plant he's studied, because this place is like so dangerous. Everybody that goes to the Bowin Islands dies, except for Heraclean. He's the only one that survived and still lives there. So Kuma's like, all right, cool. So he went there and he talked to Heraclean. I would have loved that conversation. I hope in the anime this is all expanded upon. I hope it's not just in the scene like the manga where Kuma goes to, the Bowin Islands and it's like, like 5 seconds of anime material. I hope they go with it. I hope they expand on it a little bit, where Kuma actually has a whole conversation with Heraclean. Like, helloin, I am Heraclean. Who are you, large bear man? And so Kuma's like, yeah, hi, I'm Bartholomew Kuma. I guess I'm the king of the Sorbet Kingdom, but not really. Anyway, my daughter has this rare disease. Can you help me? Is there any plant on this island? Or it's like, well, it's not really an island, more of it's like a giant Venus flytrap monster, but close enough. So I would imagine that Heraclean just gave him a tour of the archipelago, like, well, here's the giant insect forest, here's the giant gluttony forest, here's the swindling forest, here's the giant forest that looks like a forest, but the entire forest is actually a rock, and then over here, and then he's just giving him a tour of all the crazy plants, and then Kuma's like after several hours, after like 12 hours of giving him the tour, and over here is the plant that shits gold. Well, that's pretty much everything on the island. And then Kuma's like, that's fantastic. Which one of these plants is going to cure my daughter? I don't know, I don't know. You asked for a tour. I gave you a tour. Here we go. It's like, damn it. It's like, all right, sorry, I couldn't help you. You want to see my giant beetle collection? And just like Kuma's like, I would love to, but I gotta get moving. And he's like, I understand. And all right, laters. Don't have a lot of people. Like Heraclean, he's just lonely. All of his friends died. His backstory is actually remarkably similar to Brooks. Now that I'm thinking about it, all of his friends died. He was just happy to have Kuma there for company. Nobody comes to the giant carnivorous plant islands. The only people that have visited him for like the last 10 years since he's been stuck there are Kuma and Usopp. That's it. There is another location he goes, but it's not super obvious where it is. It's just like an island with some destroyed buildings, and then he's like, oh, do you know this disease? Do you know the cure? That might be Hungaria, the place that Brooke got sent. It might have been that place, okay, the poverty-stricken land, okay? We don't know if it is, though. I mean, every time we see the people of that island, it was always they were wearing the black cloaks and summoning, the devil, which turned out to be Brooke, go figure. But, it might have been that island, might not have been. But, since Oda was showcasing all the other locations, I'm assuming it probably was. Now, assuming that was Hungaria, the two locations that we do not see Kuma travel to, that he does send the Straw Hats to, are Kamabaka and Amazon Lily, where he sends Luffy and Sanji respectively. Now, Kamabaka makes sense because Kuma knew Ivankov. Kuma might have even have been to Kamabaka a couple of times when he was still a member of the Revolutionary Army, when he was out there traveling the world with the revolutionaries, okay? So I'm assuming he had been to Kamabaka before, so that's why he sent Sanji there, okay? And then Amazon Lily. We've never heard of any connection to Kuma to Amazon Lily, but Kuma did sort of have a connection with Rayleigh, and Rayleigh's been there, so maybe something. He probably had been to Amazon Lily before, or at least maybe knew the location of where it was. Maybe he doesn't physically need to be standing on the island to remember it, but like to send people there. But like if he's traveled nearby, it's like, that's Amazon Lily, the island of women. And then he's like, oh, okay, that's where it is. If I ever need to go here, or if I never need to send someone here, I don't need to step on the actual island. I know generally where it's located now. Maybe something like that, right? But yeah, he didn't travel to those islands in the last chapter, but I wanted to bring it up. So some other things. He also fights Abdullah and Jeet, who are bounty hunters we see in Dressrosa very briefly. He just battles them and just, takes them out in one single panel. Not a big deal there. So a lot of people brought up, it's like, man, it's too unfortunate that Kuma didn't make it to Drum Island, right? Like, that would have been cool if he made it to Drum. So at this point at Drum, I think Wapol would have still been in charge. But Kureha would have been there. I think at this point, Hiraluk would have been dead, but Kureha definitely would have been there. I think she would have been training Chopper at this point. So could Dr. Kureha have helped out with Sapphire Scale? I'll say if there's any doctor in the entire world that could have helped her, it would have been Dr. Kureha, because she's kind of like the best doctor of all time. Maybe she could have cured it, but the way that Vegapunk ends up curing it is using stem cells, which is like another branch of medical science. Like Kureha's was like traditional medicine. Stem cells are not really traditional medicine. That's more of like transplant kind of thing and like getting into like human genetics and DNA and the lineage factor, okay? Of which I'm sure Kureha knew a lot about, but it's like just different specializations, you know what I mean? Kureha is really good at understanding illness and making like, medication for that illness and those kind of diseases, right? Meanwhile, you have Vegapunk who's literally studying like the human genome and stuff like that. I don't even think Kureha had the medical technology advanced enough to study that, because Vegapunk, being from the future, essentially, being like hundreds of years ahead of everybody else, he has access to probably like MRIs and stuff like that. Like MRIs to study the brain and very like gene sequencers and clone tanks. And that's the kind of technology he has. Stuff from our world, if not more advanced than the stuff from our world, right? Kureha just didn't have that kind of tech on the island, okay? Now, if she had access to it, different story altogether. Like if Kureha and Vegapunk teamed up, that would actually be really cool. They could probably develop cures to like anything, right? But unfortunately, I have a feeling Kureha might have been able to make medication to curb the disease. Same thing with Crocus. Like if Kuma ran into Crocus at some point, who was Roger's doctor, who kept his chronic illness at bay, maybe they could develop something to like prolong her life, but nothing that could actually cure her. So like Kureha works on the disease of Sapphire Scale, she studies it or something, and be like, okay, well, the best I can do is I've developed some medications and some treatments for her. She'll live to be, 22, but then that's as much as I can do. I can't, I can extend her life, but I can't cure her, So Vegapunk was the one that actually had the cure there. What about Law? Law would have kind of made a name for himself, at least in the North Blue at this point. Not sure if he was in the Grand Line yet, but he would have been in the North. He had the op fruit. Law would have been like 21, 22 years old during this flashback, something like that. So it's very possible that, maybe he would have been able to do something about the illness. Could the op fruit have cured Bonney? And that's another thing, like Kuma probably would have heard about, okay, well, I went to all these islands and I couldn't find anybody that can cure Bonney. Ooh, maybe there's a devil fruit that can cure illnesses. So maybe he heard about the heal fruit. Maybe he heard about the op fruit and was like, okay, I'm going to try to find the user of the op fruit. Maybe he just couldn't find Law. Or maybe he knew about Law and, just never got a chance to meet him or just something like that. But could Law have cured her? That's an interesting one, because he basically cured a very similar illness where he was born with the amber lead in his body. That was something he was born with just genetically from how amber lead syndrome worked. And the way Law removed it, at least in the light novel, was he took out his liver and had to remove the individual pieces. So I wonder, using the op fruit, Law probably could have easily removed the sapphire scales. He could have taken off, peeled off Bonnie's skin and just all right, this won't hurt a moment. And Bonney is just there with just her muscles and just yeah, he's right, it didn't hurt at all. And just it's okay, hold on. And then Law could remove the sapphire scales themselves, but it's in her DNA. So it's oh, how do you remove that? Could Law use his room to dismantle the double helices of DNA and mess with that? I don't know if he could do that. So that's when we start getting to really advanced kind of technology and medical science, the stuff that only really Vegapunk could really do, okay? But those are some other ideas on places that he could have ended up, and, could Mansherry's heal fruit have saved him? I think the situation with the heal fruit is it could not heal disease. It could heal any type of physical injury, even something severe. Even if you had your arm cut off, you could, grab your arm and, maybe put it back on you and then heal fruit, and then it probably would have healed up. Maybe something like that, more physical injuries with the heal fruit. Other stuff would require maybe, medical treatment, with stem cells, or, the surgery with, op fruit. You know what I mean? Well, anyway, that's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. That was a fun one to make because, of course, it involved geography, and we're always here to talk about geography. That's the main focus of the channel, really. Even if I don't talk about geography every now and then, I always do. All right? So just remember that. Every video I make has a secret geography message. You just have to look hard enough. All right, later, everybody. Have a good one. Teching, signing out.